very excited about the next story. It is the story of a farmer who built a billion-dollar fintech. Lex Greensill witnessed his parents struggle with delayed payment when he was growing up on the family sugarcane farm in Australia. Their crops took 18 months to grow, while inefficient supply chains meant it took another 12 months to get paid. Now, this spurred Lex and his team to build Greensill. It's a global fintech powerhouse that specialises in working capital finance. The company has now provided funding of over $163 billion during 2020 on behalf of more than 10 million customers in 175 countries. It's a remarkable story. So the next session is moderated by Patel, who is Principal Executive Officer at the Monetary Authority of Singapore, and he'll gather insights from Lex on how his company is making finance fairer for millions of businesses and people all over the world. So without taking up any more time, let's go over to Pat and Lex to see how this visionary is making finance fairer for millions of businesses and people all over the world.
It's really nice to finally get involved in this beautiful studio. And we've had so many great sessions all week, from Sundar to Satya, PM Morrison to Vinod Khosla. But today is all about people and talent, as Manisha mentioned, and in particular, founders who have an interesting story to tell. So as Manisha just mentioned, she talked quite a bit about Greensill and in particular around Lex. But we have a founder of a company that I really believe that not enough people in our community know as enough as they should do about him. And so for the next kind of 18 minutes or so, we're going to get behind the man that is Lex and also his business. So as a child, as you can imagine, Lex wanted to be a farmer. I'm not sure he's going to like me for saying this, but it's true. He lived the high life in Queensland. And so in his spare time, he runs this business called Greensill. And, Manisha's already talked a little bit about what Greensill is. And, it's about working capital and the amount that you've funded this year. I'm going to say it again, $163 billion in 2020 alone. And that's for like 10 million customers. So the other amazing thing, and then we're going to pick up on this shortly, is that you've managed to secure funding from, some marquee investors, General Atlantic, to SoftBank's Vision Fund. And so we'll dig into that very shortly. So I just want to say it's a real pleasure to have you on the show, Lex. And I hear that you've just landed in Miami. So are you going to tell us what you're up to in Miami, or is this a secret project?
Well, Pat, thanks so much for the very kind welcome. It's very, very nice to join you and all the audience today. And our business is a global business, and in spite of what's going on from a health perspective globally, we carry on every day.
And so you've just landed in Miami, so you must be a little bit jet lagged. So I've got an energizer for you, and I've literally just sprung this on you. So it's a game called Underrated, Overrated. And I don't know if those at home would have heard Rebecca Martin play this game with a victim panel of 3 individuals. So underrated, overrated, basically, where I say one word or a phrase, and Lex simply has to answer underrated or overrated. So the first one I've got is a decent pair of socks.
Definitely underrated.
There's a running joke here, so we'll probably elaborate maybe towards the end. Artificial intelligence.
Definitely underrated.
Okay. Blockchain.
Overrated.
Overrated. And why is it you say that then?
Well, I think blockchain is simply a piece of infrastructure, and basically it's going to, for all of us, going to be something akin to the way we look at email in the future. It's simply plumbing as opposed to a solution in of itself.
You're not going to implement blockchain in your product set at all?
Oh, we have, and we do. But I guess our view on it is that it's simply part of the infrastructure as opposed to necessarily the bright new future all by itself.
Next one, SMEs.
Underrated. They're the backbone of our economy.
Absolutely, and there's been a lot of sessions all week around the importance of SMEs and how do we support SMEs in 2021. So if anyone out there has missed that content, I highly recommend it to catch up on that. The importance of working capital.
Well, I guess you'd expect me to say highly underrated.
Okay. The value of farming to global supply chains.
Well, we're the people that keep us all fed. So I don't think it gets any more important than that. So definitely underrated.
Okay, here's a random one. Rock melons.
They taste good best, though, when they're not thrown at you by one of your brothers, which is what I experienced a lot as a kid.
And the last one here is remote working. So everyone's had to do it this year.
It felt great when we started, but I'm sure many of us feel that it's a little overrated now.
Okay. So now that we've got a little bit of an understanding about you, Lex, we're going to move on to Greensill specifically. And can you share your vision of Greensill? You know, what is it you hope and aspire Greensill to be in 3 to 5 years?
For sure. We see ourselves as being a part of the process of making finance fairer for millions of businesses and consumers all around the world. We think that our technology and our unique access to capital markets on a global basis means that we can give everybody as good a deal as the biggest governments and corporates have enjoyed for decades. And that's a mission that is it's a big task, but it's certainly one that causes us all to bounce out of bed every day.
And during the challenges of this year, has that impacted the way that you've been thinking about your business, certainly for 2021 in the short term? Has there been any changes in your thinking?
For sure. COVID and the general effects of 2020 have really accelerated our business and the opportunities that we see. Certainly, 2020 has demonstrated that supply chains are more fragile than people think, but actually also that consumers find themselves in a more fragile place, and so we've been pioneering some new technology, which I'm sure we'll chat about, Pat, that not only enables us to give businesses a better deal, but actually also workers, employees a better deal as well. And we're very excited about that, and that's really accelerated during 2020 for us.
Because I remember reading earlier this year about the great work you did with the NHS in the UK, and maybe we can kind of touch upon that. But I think for those that don't know Greensill well, and certainly this space that you serve, it would be good to understand, you know, what is it you're trying to kind of solve, and, you know, what is the problem out there, basically? Because if it's not broken, why fix it?
Yeah, for sure. Look, the truth is, and maybe I'll use some statistics from Moody's here, there's about $57 trillion tied up in global supply chains at any point in time in working capital terms. So that's the amount of cash that's tied up at any point in time. And unfortunately, the way that the Basel Accords work, the rules that govern the way that banks are able to operate, it's quite tough to deliver terms on an equal basis to businesses and consumers of all sizes and stripes. And so there's an inequality. And so what we've done is built the technology to make that a little bit more equal. In fact, actually a lot more equal. And that's the reason we've been able to grow quite so quickly as we have.
And so how come there's no other players in this space, certainly the banks? Why are the banks not going in? You mentioned kind of BAL, and is there anything else? Why banks aren't doing this at scale?
Sure. Look, if your business is built off legacy systems and based on paper, the reality is it is going to take you longer, particularly also as you need to comply with the Basel Accords. It's going to take longer to be able to innovate. And as I'm sure you've seen in many of the presentations we've had at this festival, you know, the pace of change is extraordinary, and therefore one needs to move quickly. And I'm afraid that the tens of thousands of incumbents in this space, have not been able to keep pace. So I think that's probably the reason we've been able to build the business that we have. But to be clear, we're certainly not alone in this market. It's an enormous market, and there's an opportunity for many.
So if anyone's listening out there, maybe there's an opportunity for new players to come into this space too. So one of the things I kind of want to pick up is the phenomenal growth that you've had this year, I suppose, in the last kind of 12 months or so. If I'm correctly informed, you've gone from kind of 600 headcount to around about 1,200. What challenges has that kind of presented? Because growth is fantastic, but with it comes challenges, and certainly this year to onboard, say, 600 odd people into your business, what has been the major challenges in getting them on and getting them effective as soon as possible?
Sure. Look, growing at pace is an interesting experience for any company, but doing it during COVID, where there's many hundreds of our staff that have never physically ever met one another, has certainly been an interesting experience. I cast my mind back to April, May, where the first wave broke out in Europe and North America, and we pivoted from all of us working in offices to working from home at the very same time that we saw the biggest demand on our business ever. And so we were able to make a transition there that I think many of us had contingency plans for what would happen if something crazy happened, but I don't think any business ever planned on being able to transition 100% of their staff from working in offices to working from home at the same time as dealing with peak demand. So it's been an interesting experience, but one that our amazing team has led the way in.
Sure, and I'm sure it spent most of your life this year on Zoom calls or webinars, basically. But we're going to switch gears slightly now to understand a bit more about you, Lex, and just to pick up on what would you say is the defining moment that's led to where you are today in terms of Greensill, and can you share a little bit of light on that?
Sure. For me, the defining moment was growing up on a farm, not getting paid promptly for the production that my parents made, which meant that they couldn't afford to send me to university, and that kind of changes your perspective on the world. I guess working capital is not really something that when you're a teenager you spend a lot of time thinking about, but it caused me to do that. And frankly, the last 27 years has basically been focused on that. It hasn't been a straight line path, as I'm sure we all know. I've built and worked in a number of startups, and not all of them succeeded, but it toughens you up and also gives you the confidence that if you work hard enough, you absolutely can succeed. And the truth is, it takes a long time to become kind of truly expert in an area. And I guess a focus of 27 years on pretty much one thing has enabled us to build a decent foundation.
And I heard a rumor that you put yourself through law school for a purpose. Can you share with the audience what that purpose was? Apart from making money, clearly.
Well, for anybody who's clerked in a country law firm in Queensland, you'll realise that you certainly don't do it for the money. It doesn't pay very well. Look, I spent most of the time when I was training actually recrafting the rules that govern the way that farmers in Queensland and then more broadly in Australia get paid. And those rules have subsequently been enshrined in law to my great delight. And what we've then spent our time doing is actually, having made the rules work, accelerated the cash to keep up with those rules. And what many people possibly don't realise is that Greensill, in spite of all of the big numbers that you talked about, we're a company that's registered at a sugarcane plantation in Bundaberg in Queensland. That's our registered address. So we've always stayed close to our roots.
And so those rules are still in place today? Are they the rule of Lex, or do they have?
I don't think they call it that, Pat.
Maybe one day. So I was going to ask you, you mentioned some of the failed businesses, and in this part of the world, failure is a taboo. And so it would be good to kind of hear, what was one of the biggest failures you've had and what did you learn from that? Because in other parts of the world, you haven't lived unless you've failed at least 100 times. So to talk about a failure and what you learned from that.
Sure. So the first iteration of Greensill was a company that I invested in quite heavily in Sydney in Australia. And that company went bust. We learned some tough lessons there, but I think the number one thing that we learned, both through the experience and through losing a lot of money, was that there were elements to the business that were right. There were some elements that were wrong, but we learned some powerful lessons there that caused us to reshape our plans to start again. And the product of that is the business that we've just been talking about today. So determination and grit to carry on is I think a key part of being an entrepreneur and to building a successful enterprise.
Yeah, it's that never say die attitude. And I was going to say, what advice, because it sounds like you've given a little bit of advice to some of the founders that are in the audience, and what advice would you give outside of what you've just mentioned now to someone that's about to start a business, about to start on that journey? Certainly, never waste a good crisis is a cliche that rings true this year.
For sure. Look, I think the way that we built our business, which I suspect is different to others. The business has always been predicated on we have to be focused on profitability from day one. So it's pick a problem that needs fixing, focus on how to fix that problem in a profitable way, and build to deliver against that. And capital will come to you as a consequence of that. And I think that formulation has been one that stood us in good stead. And but I would say to anybody who's thinking about building a business, it's an extraordinary experience, quite a roller coaster, but I wouldn't exchange it for the world.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And certainly profitability in day one is also a novel thought, I think. So yeah, that's great advice, definitely, certainly in the fintech community. And so I'm coming on to my last kind of question for you, Lex, and that's if you could influence one thing in 2021, what would that be?
Well, I think what we are looking to influence is to help consumers. We've built an amazing product which allows the employees of governments and businesses around the world to be able to get their pay every day rather than waiting to payday. And I think that the post-COVID or hopefully post-COVID economy that we'll see in 2021 would see a very material boost from people getting paid every day, reducing the amount of credit in our economy, and using technology to fundamentally make our entire society run more efficiently and consequently bounce back from the pain and suffering that we've all experienced during 2020.
So I'm going to ask you again. So are you going to tell me what you're doing in Miami, or is that kind of something you're not willing to share?
Oh, I'm here seeing a client. So the onward rush of growing our business never stops, and I'm sure many of the folks listening to this would recognise that it's being cooped up at home is not the greatest amount of fun, and so for me it's great to be able to get out on the road and see clients again, and I'm sure many people feel the same way.
Absolutely, I completely hear you. And so, next time you're in Singapore, please spend some time with MAS. We'd welcome you with open arms.
We're delighted with our Asia headquarters in Singapore, and I'm certainly looking forward to being back very soon. Thanks very much for the opportunity, Pat.
Cool. Thanks for your time, Lex.
Gents, thank you both so much. What a great story. The story of a farmer who built a $1 billion fintech. Very fascinating, and all about how Lex there went on to solve a problem that's been directly affecting him and his family for decades.